From Sony Interactive Entertainment, the corporation that is trying to censor the internet, and Sucker Punch Productions, the developer that made that game about raccoons, comes Ghost of Tsushima. Go on a journey to ancient Japan like never before. Like never before, because ancient Japan wasn't really like this. Experience warfare, suffering, horses, collectibles, grovelling, rocket launchers, clown costumes, nudist bathing, the forbidden love between fox and man, teabagging. Welcome to Red Dead Samurai 2 Far Cry Special Edition. You kill people and collect hats. Warning, this video has some major plot spoileroo. Viewer discretion is advised. This video also contains opinions. Sadly, I didn't have time to drop by and find out what your opinions are, so unfortunately, I've just had to make do with my own. If opinions different from yours get you all bent out of shape, then spare yourself the pain and human misery and jog on. There are a lot of other free videos to watch on the internet. All you're going to get here is my uncensored, honest opinion. Nobody is obliged to agree with me. In fact, you are welcome to disagree with me and talk about it constructively in the comments. But please, don't screech at me in weeaboo if I take the piss out of your favourite samurai weapon, get some Japanese reference wrong, or prefer ninjas to samurai. Besides, Google Translate doesn't seem to work with weeaboo, so I doubt I'll understand even if you do start screeching at me. Now I've pissed some people off already, I just wanted to tell anyone new to the channel that everyone hates my guts. Go figure. YouTube rarely ever promotes my videos or suggests them. Video game publishers won't be telling anyone about my reviews. Fuck, you'll get banned from several Ubisoft subreddits and Twitch chats just for linking my videos. So now that you are here, if you end up liking what you see and want a chance to ever see another video of mine ever again, then subscribe, click that bell icon to get even a chance of notifications, follow me on Twitter, or maybe even check out my Patreon. The internet is not a welcoming place for independent, unbiased video game content creators right now, so if you want to see more, well, nobody is going to hand deliver my videos to you. But since we are all collectively here now, I guess we should start reviewing the single-player console sensation of 2020. So far, at least. So let's kneel down on the tatami mat, grab our tantos, and get stuck into the guts of this game. So what is Ghost of Tsushima? Ghost of Tsushima is an action-packed open-world action-adventure ritualistic killing simulator set in feudal Japan. More precisely, the island of Tsushima. It weaves a romantic and slightly bullshitty tale of a lone samurai fighting against a Mongol invasion force who are hell-bent on using your tiny little island of injustice and peasant abuse as a bridgehead for invading the rest of Japan. You play the part of Jet Li, samurai, cosmetic apparel collector, and all-round nice guy / mass murderer. A lone warrior who sets out to liberate the island of Tsushima from the filthy barbarian savages. Even though you and all your mates already got your fucking asses kicked by them twice. And you got thrown off a bridge. in most part because it was a scripted scene, like the first fight with Runt in Kingdom Come Deliverance. So noob samurai or not, one way or another, you are going to take a swan dive, so you might as well enjoy the view on the way down. So even though you and all your mates couldn't beat them last time around, you decide it's a good idea to try and solo the entire Mongol invasion force. Because Banzai. Needless to say, your single-handed journey of retribution, by necessity, involves you going around the island collecting as many willing allies, as you possibly can. Mostly this means begging for help from people you and your dynasty previously shit on. For whatever reason, they all seem perfectly happy to forgive all of those bad memories of executions, humiliation and subjugation, and merrily sign up to your suicide dash to defend the mother country. Because feudalism. Well, maybe they just really hate Mongols, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So let's not think too hard about it. You have to pitch your wits against the dirty, dishonourable People's Republic of China, Mongols, by using cunning, logic, persuasion and subtlety in order to prevail. I'm just fucking with you. This is a samurai video game. You murder people, do quests, and then murder more people until you are winning. The biggest acts of genuine agency in this game are: do you slash someone's guts open or throat open? Do you stab them in the front or the back? What colour paint should you choose to make your armour look pretty? Where shall I go next to do one of the above three things? There is also a strong, reasonably well-written story which regularly interrupts you whilst you travel around hunting for collectibles, climbing towers, worshipping at shrines, and enjoying the scenery. And by scenery I am of course referring to the bowels, blood and severed heads strewn ornamentally across the grass. I guess that PEGI 18 rating wasn't going to earn itself. Kind of ironic really when you consider that an 8-second hatefuck would have achieved the exact same result with considerably less bloodshed. So much wasted life. Ghost of Tsushima is heroic, fantastical, bloody, and doesn't dwell too long on the humanity of your enemies. It's a samurai adventure game. What the fuck were you expecting? You run around with a katana, butchering Mongolian savages, and talking to grovelling, grateful peasants. And then you take their stuff, upgrade your hats, and win PlayStation achievements. Because Japan. Functionality and fuckery. Ghost of Tsushima thankfully does not have loot boxes or an in-game store. Sad that this statement is practically a compliment these days. It's like saying someone is a good husband because he doesn't beat his wife. It is not without issues, however, but overall it's a fairly stable, functional, well-polished, working experience. The game did launch with bugs. Lots of people have reported issues with the standoff mode, which was temperamental at times, but my experience with the game has been mostly issue-free and silkier than the braided, lacy thingy fucks that you tie around your sword holster. Sword sheath. Whatever. I did have issues with a base mission which had one invisible NPC. Until I killed that fuck nugget, I couldn't clear the base, but despite resetting the encounter several times, that one last guard, who had decided to wander off into the bushes for a wank, completely eluded me, and normally I'm fairly skilled at finding wankers hiding in bushes. Look, there's one right there. The enemy AI is Ubisoft massive levels of awful at times. The guards will be standing there stirring their stink pot of rotten chicken stew. You will kill their friends with a bow. They briefly look up and spend a minute or two looking around, then shrug it off and go back to their position and carry on stirring their carrion hot pot indefinitely, whilst you proceed with butchering all of the rest of their mates. It's like someone collided the movie Memento with basic sentry duties. The stupid, forgetful fuckers just seem to go full goldfish after coming under attack. Talking of Ubisoft, it does at least make you realise why the bases in Far Cry have alarm klaxons. Just like the Mongolian bases in this game have alarm horns. Different epochs, same game dynamics. The bamboo forests render beautifully, but not everything has a collision box. I didn't appreciate at first how much of a good idea this was. Let's face it, you spend half the game riding around on a horse, on an island, covered in bamboo. It would be a miserable experience if every single sapling and bamboo sprout had a hitbox, and was therefore a tripping hazard, so that every 5 feet, your face planted into some fuck of a bamboo tree. It would literally just be doof after doof. Maybe there is a lesson here that the Division 2 should learn. You can loot and interact from horseback in this game, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. Seriously, the whole shag of dismounting, picking up a herb, then remounting is an almighty shag in other games. This reminded me of the proximity auto-loot feature in Ghost Recon Fuckpoint. It's just one small, seemingly insignificant design choice that ends up being an incredibly good quality of life improvement to the player. I would, however, note that it would be nice if the horse had a better gearbox. Right now the horse only has 2 preset speed settings, slow and spurs in the arse fast. It's like a sports car that only has an on and an off button in place of an accelerator pedal. Trotting is way too slow. Galloping is top speed. Given the scenic nature of the game, I reckon it would be ideal to have a middle speed that is slow enough for you to soak up the vibes, but not so slow you feel like you're pissing away your entire day's gaming. Seriously, the trot is slow. I swear the horse shits faster out the back than you are moving at the front. I don't know what the horse word is for third gear, but this fucking pony needs it. The tracking third-person camera is 70% cinematic, 30% tactical, and 100% fucking broken. I know that comes to 200%, so my maths is obviously a bit shit. But not as shit as the tracking camera view, which regularly fucks your field of view into a hillside, a rock face, over your own fucking shoulder, or pushes your head into a wardrobe, or some other random terrain object, right at the critical point of a fight. Most of the time it's great and works beautifully, but in enclosed spaces, when you're fighting on sloped ground or near terrain objects, sometimes the camera decides to fuck off into a bush and leave you totally blind, defenceless and discombobulated. Having to reposition yourself because of the drunk camera view, rather than the tactics of the actual fight, definitely scuffed my barbarian uncivilised European Nanban nipples. It has frequently turned an epic immersive battle into one of those situations where you find yourself thinking, oh yeah, I'm playing a video game. A very cinematic video game admittedly, but one with a drunk cinematographer. This requires a patch, ASAP. As does the NPC interactions, where sometimes you have to be in the exact precise spot facing the exact precise correct direction before you can speak to them. Nothing says spoiled immersion louder than jiggling around trying to interact with an NPC while spamming the interact button. Now I come to think of it, that's also probably the same reason why virtual reality pornography hasn't really caught on. But please feel free to respond with your experiences down in the comments section, be that with the problematic NPC interactions or with virtual reality pornography. Real samurai versus fantasy samurai. I quickly need to address the fantasy portrayal of the samurai in this game. I think the main story does do a good job of highlighting the differences between the ideals of the samurai and the realities of war. But right now I'm specifically addressing the romantic vision of samurai culture. It needs to be addressed, primarily because it's bullshit. Look, I have no doubts that there were immensely noble and brave samurai, but for the most part, samurai were basically hired thugs. Most of the honour code and all of that shite has been tacked on over the centuries. For the most part, samurai were trained bodyguards for a local boss man or head chief, and when nobles got into big scraps, they would bring them to a battle. Japan basically had a caste system, and just like most corrupt societies, 1% of the population owned nearly fucking everything, and the rest of us peons had to scrabble around in the dirt, doing the farming and carpentry and cleaning just to pay the bills and buy a bowl of rice. Most samurai didn't sit around meditating, writing treatises about martial philosophy or practicing their Bushido skills. Plenty of samurai just sat around drinking, gambling and practicing their bukkake skills. History has glorified the memory of the most noble samurai and conveniently forgotten about the brutal reality of the times. For the average person in feudal Japan, you spent most of your day knee-deep in shit, working your guts out for some stuck-up lord, and the only thing that broke up the boredom was occasionally having someone kick the shit out of you for not working hard enough, or getting your head cut off by a samurai because of some real or perceived slight. In fact, the average peasant probably stood a better chance of dying at the end of a samurai sword than the average fucking samurai. It's a culture where everyone has to constantly bow to each other, and if you bow in the wrong way, at the wrong time, or you don't bow low enough, you might get your head cut off and put in a severed head collection. That should be a red flag right there. I'm not saying we were any better in the West. In fact, in many ways, we were precisely the same. We didn't introduce the chivalric code because knights were incredibly honourable chaps. The Knight's Code was introduced to try and stop the psychotic, greedy psychofucks from constantly waging war, raping and pillaging. The whole of Western Europe would have ended up as a pile of smouldering rubble if knights had their way, because they like to fight, wage war, and take other people's stuff. Same shit. Different continent. The best way to illuminate how out of touch this game is with the reality of feudal Japan was a moment in the game where I was composing a haiku by looking around for inspiration in my immediate environment. And whilst I was doing this, in plain sight, some poor abandoned peasants were getting their brains bashed in by Mongols right there in front of me. The peasants are taking a beating. The Lord and Master is writing fucking poems. It's all about priorities, right? Well, if you're a samurai, apparently writing little ditties takes priorities over saving peons. You know, the peons that farm the food and do the work. And that scene right there perfectly illuminated what life was like for normal people during feudal times. Ghost of Tsushima is to samurai what Top Gun is to fighter combat. Entertaining as all fuck, but not particularly realistic. Should they have done it differently though? I don't know. Be a bit depressing, wouldn't it? A samurai game where you spend half your time drinking sake, grumbling and terrorising the locals, and then decapitate a peasant on the way home before you sleep it off? Actually, if Warhorse Studios made a realistic samurai game, that would probably be incredibly awesome.
We need to move.
Character development. I have seen a few discussions about whether or not Ghost of Tsushima has RPG elements. Well, I would say this, only if you are very easily pleased. The character development is primarily about levelling up, getting points to put in skills, and the real diversity comes from which charms, weapons and armour you choose. Although I would note, a wardrobe function where you could save some presets would be nice, because frankly, I could not be bothered to fuck around changing my gear and assigning 6 different charms just to sneak past a couple of guards. Just saying. Considering this game manages to be derivative of so many other games, it's a shame they didn't borrow the outfit mechanics from Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, they managed to borrow the horse mechanics. Why stop there? You can genuinely customise your character to optimise your own fighting style, however. My style is being very, very terrible, so this allowed me to invest heavily up the very, very terrible skill tree. Not even kidding, you can get charms that bubble up your health and smoke bombs so you can disengage. As Sun Tzu once famously said, the mighty warrior knows when to shit his pants and flee, so that he can come back in the night and stab his enemy whilst they sleep. I'm fairly sure he said that. And even if he didn't, I just said it for him. Whilst the overarching build, gear and levelling mechanics are simple and relatively linear, the end result is a system complex enough to allow the player to customise their playstyle whilst being straightforward enough not to require build videos and busting the calculator out to figure out what is best DPS. Literally, it's like, there's your fucking armour, it's got a description, if you like that description, put it on. Come back with a bushel of bamboo and some nonsense and I'll buff it up one level. You can do that 3 times, now fuck away and leave me to do my armour polishing animation. Don't get me wrong, there is plenty of scope to adjust your character to suit very different fighting and problem solving skills. But when it comes to character levelling itself, I didn't really have to face any tough choices. You just kinda grind points, invest them in perks, and eventually you'll max level at everything. There's no either or choices really, it's like having 3 piles of boxes and stacking one to the ceiling first. Sure, at a certain point, depending on how you stack them, stack 1 might be taller than stack 3, but eventually if you play the game long enough, all 3 stacks will reach the ceiling of your sex dungeon. Combat. I will qualify now, I am not great with a controller, and I don't normally play this kind of combat game. Fuck, I was once accused of operating my controller with my feet. Not even kidding. And I didn't have the heart to tell them I was playing the game on PC. However, even as a no-skill button-smashing, controller-chewing clueless fuck, on medium setting, even I managed to both enjoy and mostly prevail in combat. It's designed, from the ground up, to be entertaining and not infuriating. The combat is deliberately cinematic and structured so that your mastery of the combat mechanics results in increasingly less hectic and more beautifully cinematic scenes. I personally found that less is more. Once I got past the point of frantic button mashing, I realised that doing 1 or 2 moves right could dominate where 50 button smashes failed. The moral of the story is, chewing on your console controller might be comforting, but staying calm and reacting with the correct counter is win. I'm bad on a controller and terrible at fighting games, but even I eventually found a fighting style where I could dominate. Although, if I am brutally honest, on medium difficulty, button mashing was often a very viable tactic. If you absolutely fail at this sort of combat style, well, you have options. And I'm not just talking about setting the game on easy, and easy is very, very easy in this game. With the exception of a few boss encounters, most of the time you can stealth through missions and use guile where your strength is lacking. Personally though, I found sticking on my clan armour with lots of health and damage mitigation and buffing the shit out of it made up for those moments where my face roll playstyle failed me, and chewing on the controller was failing to provide me with enough dexterity. Early to mid game at least. A lot is discussed about stances in this game. Apparently the popular narrative states that you can only beat certain types of enemy with the correct stance equipped. Well, I just stayed in water stance for a lot of the game and battered the shit out of everyone. No fucks given. It helps at higher difficulty and if you're a weeaboo perfectionist, but on medium settings I rarely encountered any enemy that could not be beaten by 2 sidesteps and a katana jabbed up their arse briskly. This said, bosses were a very different kettle of fish altogether. As a general rule, generic enemies could be overcome relatively easily with lots of rolling and a few well-aimed flurries. But I'm not going to lie, some of the bosses fucked me over repeatedly. Even on medium. One boss I got so frustrated with I did it on easy, just to get past it. And no word of a lie, I felt dirty afterwards. I literally felt unworthy and regretted it immediately. I reckon that says something about this game. The best compliment I can give the combat in this game is this: I wanted to learn it, improve and master it. In many games this kind of combat annoys the piss strings out of me, but in Tsushima I actually started entertaining the idea of studying the combos and counters until I really knew how to play. For a lazy as all fuck face roller like myself, that is a compliment of the highest order. The armour, perk progression, set moves and charm slots all add to make the combat more personalised and optimised. You can buff that shit right out for improved performance, and this greatly helps skillless fuckbadgers like myself that struggle to learn the combat quickly and effectively. The character combat development isn't what I would call RPG-ish, because frankly, you just choose what to spec into first. Eventually you can earn enough Japanese martial arts dollars to get all the upgrades, but the physical kit choices do allow the player to lean heavily into different playstyles, until such time as you've earned enough XP and bought all the skills and you can do whatever the fuck you like. I guess the best way I can summarise the combat is this. On easy, it's face roll combat. On medium, it's still mostly face roll combat, until you get nearer the end of the game or you hit a boss fight. On hard, you actually have to know what you're doing, or it's going to be miserable. This being said, it's fucking satisfying regardless. I mean, who doesn't like slashing their way through an army of idiots with a razor-sharp sword? The story, setting and gameplay. It's a classic age-old tale of balancing forces. The traditional ways balance against the necessity of war, personal differences versus the greater good, your own honour versus the welfare of the people. Basically, do the ends justify the means? Normally, I would say that the ends don't justify the means. If you have to sacrifice your humanity and principles in order to prevail, there's no point in prevailing anyway. So find another way. However, in this game, the means to an end largely boils down to deciding to use some slightly naughty assassination and stealth techniques frowned upon as dishonourable in order to kill some Mongols who, incidentally, you were going to kill anyway. Stabbed up is stabbed up in my book. In the back, in the front, whilst they're asleep. Who gives a shit? Who cares if you're going to be a bit sketchy about it? My personal philosophy is summed up like this. You should only ever shoot someone as a last resort. But if you did shoot someone dead, if it was a death row inmate escaping whilst being taken to the electric chair, well, really you're only talking about 5 minutes of their leg stretching time. It's not the same as shooting someone who is walking away from the electric chair because they just won their appeal and were going to be released. Cruel logic, I know, but logic nevertheless. So yeah, personally, I stealth and murdered my way through this game, no fucks given, and with the full knowledge that when it was all over, the head teacher at Samurai Training College would probably call me in for a detention and make me write out, "I must kill Mongols less dishonourably," 1,000 times. In that squiggly, weird, foreign writing with the little houses. The characters were pretty good. Not Kingdom Come Deliverance levels of excellent, but solid. And superior to, say, Red Dead Redemption 2. The game setting is beautiful and heavily styled on the idealised, magical vision of Samurai Land, rather than the more rustic and realistic visions of Japan, where nearly everyone was either being a peasant or beating and killing peasants. Some of the design and scenic cutaways are clearly trying to evoke traditional Japanese art, and I swear a couple of times it was imitating the colour palette and visual style of Katsushika Hokusai. Some people seem to be a lot more deeply affected by the story than I was. Perhaps my stone-cold, cynical heart is not so easily tickled. But I would concede that the story is good, and it has some very touching moments. Even for a cynical bastard like me. It is also interesting to note that the personal, moral, martial and philosophical journey that your character, Jin Sakai, takes is paralleled by the real historical events. Like any island ecology, it evolves in response to local pressures of survival, and often, when something from outside that environment turns up, which did not evolve there, and particularly when something turns up which evolved in a continental ecology, the locals don't have any means to deal with it. It's just like when invasive rats arrive on tropical islands when merchant ships arrived. They frequently devastated the local ecology because there were no predators to deal with them or other mammals to compete with them. Unchecked, they wreak havoc. This is pretty much what happened when the Mongols turned up in the 13th century and tried to invade Japan. The Japanese system of warfare had largely evolved around the principles of how people waged war between each other on the islands of Japan. Then a giant Mongol horde rocked up on the shores. They didn't give much of a fuck about complying with Japanese honourable sensibilities about warfare. They were there to win, by any means, pillage the villages, and steal all the fucking pies. No fucks given. They did this with a very well-evolved utilitarian warfare strategy which was much more organised according to very pragmatic principles. They liked horses, very powerful short bows and fighting in groups. They were very effective. Jin Sakai's personal struggles between honouring tradition and adapting to counter a new threat in some ways is a metaphor for what Japan had to deal with as a whole at the time. It is frequently argued that the katana in fact evolved as the dominant sword type in response to the Mongol invasions, because the Japanese needed a sword more suited to the new challenges of warfare, a sword that was shorter than the traditional tachi, which was primarily a cavalry sword. So yeah, the story represents in some ways the struggles of Japanese martial culture in microcosm, although it does highlight a few anachronisms. The Mongol invasion started in 1274. The katana is attributed to the Muromachi period, roughly 1392 onwards, and incidentally, haiku was invented during the 17th century. Yet here we are in Ghost of Tsushima, running around with a fucking katana and blissing out writing haiku in 1274, with all the chronological accuracy of a fucking time traveller. But you know, let's not overthink it. This is a romanticised version of history. This is Last Samurai. It's not a documentary. So what's my overarching take on this game as a whole? The black and white Akira Kurosawa setting was funny and kind of ironic, really. Yes, they actually got the Kurosawa estate's approval to feature a black and white Kurosawa-esque filmic mode for the game. Kurosawa was the epic Japanese filmmaker behind such classics as Star Wars: A New Hope, The Magnificent Seven, and A Fistful of Dollars. Kurosawa also made critically acclaimed observational social commentary movies about Japanese life around the World War II period, about which nobody gives a fuck because they don't have samurai and sword fighting in them. Harsh, but true. I think in small ways, however, the game misses the point of Kurosawa movies in a way. Kurosawa was not really a guy beholden to the romanticised myth of samurai and was more of a realist and perhaps pragmatist. Toshiro Mifune's character was really representative of social transition and realism, and in The Seven Samurai the crew were basically all Ronin. Personally, I thought Kurosawa films were challenging the status quo rather than representing it. I reckon the guy is all about the Book of Five Rings, not ritual seppuku and blindly following duty. Still, the Kurosawa mode does indeed look very pretty. The over-romanticised vision of feudal Japan is not without its issues, as previously stated. There is the whole troubling issue of the injustices and inequalities of Japanese feudal society. Basically, you can just wander into anyone's home, poke around, take their stuff, and not only do they not give you a fucking slap, they bow to you, because that's how feudalism works. I mulled over this problematic socio-political aspect of the game's design, and eventually came to the following inevitable conclusion. Fuck it! I'm the boss, and they're the peasants, so it works out just fine for me. I'll keep stealing their shit, and they can keep fucking bowing to me. Job done. No sleep lost. You can choose how you want to fight. There is incredible latitude and scope for your playing style, which is excellent. It's excellent because I'm fucking terrible at fighting fair in games. All this shite about honour, fighting fair, and not using dishonourable and deceptive tactics in war is all fine and dandy, if you're a fucking idiot. But personally, I'll leave that nonsense to the fucking tourists. I'm more of a ninja guy than a samurai guy. Why fight fair if you can stab some fool in the back? Why stab them in the back if you can shoot them in the back with a bow? Why use a sword if you can bounce a bomb off their face? I found leaning into ranged combat a bit, explosives, stealth, and my finely honed and very well practiced running away skills allowed me to conquer my enemies, even if this required me running away for a quick breather. Honourable or not. There is no denying that this game is beautiful looking. It's one giant weeaboogasm, splashed large across your screen in full Technicolor. It's a game where sometimes you just chill on your horse, trotting along, soaking up the slightly cartoonish at time vibes, watching the cherry blossom, until of course you faceplant into some Mongols, who you then immediately hack to death, because it's entertaining. The platforming is fun. Yes, I just said that, and I wasn't drunk or high. The platforming / exploration is so nicely done, satisfying, scenic, and well structured and thought out that even I enjoyed the platforming. And that's coming from someone who hated Doom Eternal for all of the platforming in that game. The game environment is beautiful, picturesque, and follows the same philosophy of games like Red Dead Redemption and Skyrim. It's a miniaturised ecosphere, a microcosm of a semi-realistic world. It seems fairly big, although I did some rough maths and it appears to be a version of Tsushima Island that is 2 kilometres wide and approximately 10 kilometres tall. About 1/7 scale. I probably could have googled the scale of the in-game world, but why look something up when you can calculate it for yourself incorrectly? The game makes you feel powerful, and it does this in a very satisfying way. You get to kill a lot of idiots. Not a sophisticated way to make you feel powerful, but killing is fun. I'm pretty shit at these games, but with a bit of learning, grinding and applying yourself, if you know your limits and play to your strengths very quickly, you will be beating the shit out of everyone, with the possible exception of the episodic but relatively rare boss encounters. I think I maybe one-shotted one of these, but most of the time, if I'm honest, they're a bit of a challenge. The rest of the game, whilst I did die from time to time because of stupidity, most of the fights made me feel godlike. The treatment of the main characters and antagonists is done very well and sits comfortably within the wider framework of a consistent game world and a decent story. There is an argument that the day-to-day Mongol NPCs are fairly two-dimensional, cookie-cutter generic enemies, but the game pretty much gets away with it. After all, they are red shirts. They're Mongol red shirts. So brown shirts, technically. They are expendable. They're like stormtroopers on the Death Star. They are primarily there to run out in front of the nice people and to die well. They're part of the scenery, like props, that serve the purpose of adding a tangible threat to the protagonist, but don't really represent a real threat. So yeah, the boilerplate Mongols are like the guards in a Far Cry base, but at least that's less cheesy than having them shout the name of their dog, or scream, "They got Bill!" in some repetitive fake attempt to inspire sympathy. It's not that kind of game. You don't want to feel sympathy for your enemy, you want to gut them. The game's grammar is frankly a breath of fresh air. Sure, there are maps and waypoints, but most of the time the game speaks to the player and guides them completely organically. You're directed by the wind to your destination. You track birds and foxes to shrines and locations and pursue quests by searching for chrysanthemums or using traditional Japanese pictograms and maps drawn on parchment. It handles a lot of the gameplay in a consistent and naturalistic way that mostly avoids breaking the player's immersion. Although I would note, the only time I've ever seen a grown man chase a four-legged animal across a field with such enthusiasm, the bloke was carrying one Wellington boot and a bottle of cider. There is no escaping the fact that it's repetitive as all fuck at times. In the second act, I got given this one quest to do, and when I arrived I realised it was the same as one of the previous set-piece quests, only now I had to repeat it in 3 different parts of the same location. And I had to do that at least 6 fucking times more in the other locations. Literally 3 times 6 or 7 identical questoids. Rinsed and fucking repeated in already rinsed locations. So yeah, the gameplay itself is fun, but damn, some of the doing work starts to lose its sheen when you've done the same precise thing 30 to 40 times. Seriously, think clearing a base in Far Cry 3. There is also the issue with looting supplies. I guess you have to loot stuff so you can buy stuff. But the game does suffer slightly from loot syndrome. You know what I'm talking about. You're enjoying a set piece or talking to a companion during a quest. But god damn it, if you pass anything lootable, you feel compelled to quickly go and snaffle it up. And in the process reminding yourself that you are playing a video game and not enjoying the experience. Nearly every single time I was riding through the countryside enjoying a bit of plot exposition, I found myself careening off randomly into the bushes to hoover up some flashing bamboo loot. Imagine if someone threw some meth onto the interstate. Now imagine how a crack addict would ignore their safety and sprint out across 4 lanes of fast-moving traffic to jump on that free shit in the road. That's frequently how you will behave in this game. Ah, it was a terrible tragedy how your sons died. Oh fuck, hold that thought. I'm just gonna fuck off into that bush and grab that yew sapling. BRB! This game frankly justifies the suggestion that all financial looting should be scrapped in favour of quest reward payments. The looting of anything but collectibles or ammo does not enhance the experience in games like this one. It trivialises it. It works in Fallout. Here, not so much, because of the cinematic nature of the experience. I have to take issue with anyone claiming that the representation of the samurai is historically accurate and genuine. The version of the samurai you see in this game is the fantasy version of samurai. And I'm talking Lord of the fucking Rings, Krull, or Princess Bride levels of fantasy. It's romantic, fun, and life-affirming, but the honourable, principled, and noble samurai rendition you see in this game ain't nothing like the fucks behaved in real life. Did you see our guy Jin Sakai decapitate any villagers for not showing him enough respect? Did you see Lord Shimura cut off Yuna's pretty brain carrier when she grumped at him? Did we see samurai turning up at a village, demanding sake, then getting drunk and executing some poor innocent peon because of some real or perceived slight? Then getting so wankered they started challenging each other to duels in the street? No. Samurai culture supported and was part of a pretty brutal and sadistic form of feudalism, and we only saw the fantasy. In fact, the most realistic thing in this game was the moments where you turn up to save starving villagers, and then loot their fucking supplies out of their homes the very next instant. That is samurai culture. This game is romanticised fantasy history, and not historically accurate. The armour was kind of authentic though. Unlike the sticky bombs, and carrying 2 swords, 2 bows, multiple explosive weapons, 5 throwing knives and a fucking grappling hook. I would note that at first I wasn't that into the armour collecting and spamming up mini-game, but there came a point where I found myself getting rather too excited about my appearance in an almost sexual, weird, fetishistic way. Like the weeaboo equivalent of a furry. Actually, weeaboo is all I needed to say there. Then again, I guess there are worse things to have a fetish about. Google chasmophilia, melissophilia, or objectophilia. Seriously, getting slightly turned on by pixelated samurai armour is fairly tame. At least I don't get aroused by chasms, wasps, or the Eiffel Tower. And for the record, the story about the Swedish guy who died whilst trying to fuck a hornet's nest, it's an urban myth. Unlike the woman who married the Eiffel Tower. It was a beautiful ceremony, and certainly more functional than most of my relationships. In the final analysis, Ghost of Tsushima has done well, and for good reason. It's a simple, whole, finished video game with no microtransactions. It's an escapist game you play, without having modern social politics rammed up into your grill. Mostly. It's an entirely idealised, romanticised hero story, but you won't mind because it's satisfying to play. And as a result of all of this, it has done record sales, earned excellent reviews from critics and players alike, and managed to piss off the People's Republic of China. Excellent. All boxes ticked. Job done. Mission fucking accomplished. Is it perfect? Fuck no. But its great strength is that none of its faults significantly reduce the overall enjoyment of playing. But the repetitiveness of some missions certainly tries its best to be annoying. The inaccurate portrayal of the samurai matters not one fuck whilst you're slicing through 8 Mongols. The two-dimensional portrayal of the enemy NPCs matters not one fuck because they're only there to be target dummies for your katana and bullshito practice. The failure to address the injustice of feudal society matters not one fuck when you cash in your supplies to upgrade your oh-so-pretty armour and buy hats. The repetitive and derivative game elements matter not one fuck because it's done so well. But let's not fuck around. They are repetitive and they are derivative. It's all very well handled and well constructed, but if anyone uses words like original, groundbreaking, or innovative to describe anything about this game other than the fox, bird, wind mechanics, I'll probably choke on my Coca ramen noodles, which incidentally are not Japanese. They are made in Singapore, and they are sold in prison. This game is like a little bit of every open world, storied RPG-ish kinda adventure game you have ever played, mashed into one, like your mate taking a glug of every single drink you like at a party, sticking it in a blender with half a pineapple and a couple of shots of vodka, thrown in for luck, and somehow managing to create a rando cocktail monstrosity that not only didn't taste like sick, but was actually rather pleasant. Maybe that's the best way to describe Ghost of Tsushima. It's a cocktail that's made up of every drink you like that somehow manages not to taste of sick. That analogy sounded a lot better in my head. Talking of sick, not going to lie, I did start to feel a slight bit of loot fatigue whilst I was foraging for generic supplies and iron and what shit ever it was. Also, some of the buildings late game started to feel very cookie cutter. Sorry, but there it is. Same old piles of loot-tastic supplies, same old houses with the same layout, the same old crawl spaces with the same old ladders in roughly the same places, and the same old Mongol tents with 2 shelves. Sorry, but the interior of most of the yurts, the Mongol tents, seem to me at least to be practically identical. And I'm talking IKEA levels of uniformity. This game was not without controversy. It's worth noting that this game, which is entirely uncontroversial, has managed somehow to cause multiple shitstorms, which I think says a lot about the political times in which we live. Let's face it, there's nothing new or controversial about this game. Structurally, it doesn't contain anything much different from games like Shogun Total War. There's nothing new in the whole damn game. It's all been done in other games. It's a defining quality of Ghost of Tsushima. It's completely unoriginal, in a nice way. It's just a combination of old stuff done very, very well, wrapped up with a pretty story bow and patted on the bum. First off, the professionally offended section of the internet accused the game of somehow being racist and guilty of cultural appropriation. I was so shocked when I heard this that I literally spat my tin grapefruit soda out, drenching my dreadlocks in the process. Yeah, apparently having an American game studio make a game about Japan is now an act of cultural appropriation. This accusation is a 1 kilometre deep strip mine full of fucking stupid and doesn't deserve serious attention. So I will just say this. If everyone around the world takes off their cowboy hats and surrenders them to their local American embassy, then I will consider discussing the issue of cultural appropriation in this game. Then again, cowboy hats were culturally appropriated from the vaqueros from Mexico, and they culturally appropriated the concept of vaquero, which has its origins in the hacienda system, which is, Spanish. I guess when it comes to the absurdity of cultural appropriation accusations, I reckon there are more than enough fuck-offs to go around. The People's Republic of China also dogpiled into the shit wrestling competition by trying to organise a Chinese boycott of the game. They are claiming that the game is anti-China and offensive. Their logic is a hilarious work of propaganda based on a foundation of other propaganda. It's a funny little bullshit story, and it goes like this. The Mongols invaded China at some point. To save face, China reclassified Mongolia as an ethnic subset of Chinese, therefore turning Mongols invaded us into some of us invaded the rest of us. What the actual fuck? So now China has saved face, can claim they weren't invaded at all, even though they totally were. However, this now means that Ghost of Tsushima is now a game where you ride around killing Chinese soldiers. And China is very, very upset about this, because apparently it's irrelevant that they are invading Japan at the time. The important thing is the whole of the South China Sea and everything in it belongs to China, according to facts that China also made up. Therefore, the samurai fighting the Mongols is not resisting an invader. The samurai are murdering their Chinese rulers. I think at this point in the discussion it should be crystal clear that China is now officially the biggest threat to world peace and global sanity on the entire world stage, and probably the world's biggest producer of bullshit. If you haven't got the memo that China is our generation's version of 1930s pre-war Germany, then I'm giving you the memo now. China are the bad guys, not Chinese people, but the Chinese government. Get it now? Political re-education camps, state-run media, total censorship, corruption, executing ethnic minorities, disappearing political opponents, international espionage, and now they think the whole of the South China Seas all belong to them, and they plan to annex it, just like Germany annexed Austria and the Sudetenland. They are the bad guys, and everyone needs to tell them to fuck off at every opportunity. Sonny might be a bunch of censorial bastards, but at least they tell China to fuck off. Props where props is due. My advice is to read the book Hidden Hand, and then you will start telling China to fuck off a lot too. Honestly, I can't find anything in this game to get upset about really. It's like the movie Armageddon. Sure, it's not entirely accurate and it's a bit cheesy, but it's a shitload of fun. Shame you don't get to see someone rub chocolate biscuits on Liv Tyler though. In fact, perhaps Ghost of Tsushima is defined by the fact that it doesn't do anything wrong enough to piss off anyone. Well, unless you're very easily offended. 21 kilotons top tips for prevailing as an honourable samurai warrior. Well, it should be fucking obvious that rule number 1 is don't be honourable. That shit right there is for the tourists and the weeaboos. If you want to fight fair, save it for your second playthrough. Personally, I found being a dirty fucking douchebag, sneak thief was a far more pragmatic option. Without giving too much away, do the busy work to upgrade your gear, character and collect the charms. You can improve your armour, weapons, weapon types, skills, abilities, talents and even play dress up Samurai Barbie. It pays dividends. Investing time and effort in improving your skills is great and all, but so is investing less time and effort in getting better gear, then playing pissed with no fucks given because your armour is insanely overpowered. As always, invest wisely. In video games, as in life, it is often better to be really good at one thing as opposed to not completely shit at everything. Personally, I compensated for my abject lack of ability, coordination and sobriety by putting on sick armour, investing in parry skills and stacking on some health regen. Oh yeah, I also decided to go ham with the bow, because going toe to toe with a group of Mongols might show you're brave, but shooting 3 of them in the fucking head with a bow at the start shows that you're smart. Diversify with your secondary weapons and tools, and use the ammos in turn. I know this contradicts what I said about specialising in specific areas, but here is my logic. Bows start out with 8 arrows, you're throwing daggers 3. You replace your ammo stock by looting. Therefore, the more secondary weapons you unlock and the more you upgrade your ammo capacity, the less you find yourself running around failing to loot ammo from dead dickheads because you are ammo capped or simply haven't unlocked a secondary weapon type. Bows, throwing knives, sticky bombs and all that good shit are very useful in tipping a fight in your favour. Why carry 8 arrows when you could carry 16? Why carry 1 ammo type when you can carry more? Go all in with the standoff skills and perks. You literally cannot go wrong here. If you are maxed out at the start of a fight, you get to challenge them to a toe-to-toe old-fashioned Western fast draw competition where you can insta-jib a string of enemies before the real fight actually begins. What the fuck is there not to like about this? All you have to do is press a fucking button correctly a few times in a row, and in return you get some beautiful cinematic carnage, and a gang of fuckboys get to go home with their intestines in plastic shopping bags. Winning. Read some Sun Tzu. Personally, I think every gamer should read Sun Tzu's Art of War at least once. The advice is stellar and applies to so many situations. Now you have an excuse to read a book/web page, although I say get the book and leave it out somewhere so people think you're smart or pretentious. People will bullshit you all day long about the message in Sun Tzu's legendary book, but it pretty much boils down to this. Put your ego aside and fight smart. Your actions should only service the end results you're striving to achieve. Trivialities like convention, tradition, appearances, emotion, retribution and your ego need to be removed from the equation. Sun Tzu's philosophy is not about winning medals, it's about winning wars. And if you can trick your enemy into chasing you around the countryside until they run out of food and the army deserts, well, a win is a fucking win. You can discuss whether it's honourable or not later, at your victory party, whilst you're taking a bath in the hot springs, getting a suck job from a geisha girl and counting your gold. And as I'm sure you can imagine, I have no boo-hoos to give about whether or not I was honourable or not. So let's wrap this up. As an open world RPG fanatic, Ghost of Tsushima is like a comfortable pair of old slippers. Bukkake covered slippers, but slippers nevertheless. It's comfortable, satisfying and feels strangely familiar, because it all is familiar, for fuck's sake. It's a combination of Fallout, Assassin's Creed, Skyrim, Far Cry 5, A New Dawn, Far Cry 3, Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead Redemption 2, Shadows of Mordor and many, many more games. It's basically every good idea from lots of other games you've played, all wrapped up neatly in a weeaboo parcels with lashing of idealised, romanticised historical samurai bullshit and a big razor-sharp fucking sword. This is a fantasy samurai open world theme park. It's ridiculous, but it's well done and quite enjoyable. It's like a whack-a-mole game, only with swords and Mongols' heads instead of a mallet and gophers, or moles. And maybe that's the issue here. I like it, which could itself be an issue. If someone made a video game where you go around posting dog shit through the letterboxes of nice old elderly ladies, if it was an open world RPG with strong character development, spanky loot, nice visuals, a semi-engaging story with hundreds of hours of gameplay, I'd love it. I guess what I'm saying is, just because I love mashed banana does not, in and of itself, mean that it's a fine meal. Ghost of Tsushima is kind of a bit like mashed banana. If you like this sort of game, you will be very, very easily pleased with it. If not, it's just going to be yet another open world fantasy RPG V-Lite time sink. This being said though, it is hard to dislike this game. I mean, what is there not to like? It's a finished video game for a fair flat price. It has a few flaws, but it's basically hundreds of hours of open world fun with a semi-decent story and no fuck around microtransactions and loot boxes. It's a fair deal. If every game was as good value as Ghost of Tsushima, I'd be out of a job. I'd probably have to go back to making cute raccoon compilation videos. So in the final analysis, should you buy this game? Ghost of Tsushima, despite its deficits, is excellent by any standards. And I can put my hand on my heart, look you straight in the eye and say that I absolutely and without reservation recommend that you boycott this fucking game. I shit you not. Boycott it. Because Sony just tried to censor the internet. Sony just rolled out the most corrupt review cycle of The Last of Us 2 that the gaming community has seen since Battlefield Vagina. Boycott it because Sony and Naughty Dog abused the DMCA process to threaten the livelihoods of independent video game reviewers. And failing all of that, boycott it because I gave The Last of Us 2 a negative review and somebody, Naughty Dog, got the video demonetised and then reported me for hate speech because I dared to suggest that the game exploited identity politics to manipulate the review process at the expense of genuine tolerance. Ghosts of Tsushima should have been Sony's beautiful and graceful swan song for the PS4, the melodic outro theme music to this console, its season finale. But it will always be overshadowed by Sony's disgraceful recent anti-consumer, anti-gamer conduct. So whilst it might be excellent, I cannot in good conscience recommend you buy it right now. Summon all of your reserves of self-restraint and wait until it's on first discount. Because people should never forget how Sony shat on gamers this year. Sucker Punch Productions did superb work with this game, and it brings me no joy to say all of this. But there it is. On a positive note, self-discipline, restraint, patience, self-control and behaving honourably are defining qualities of the samurai, apparently. So therefore, if you really are desperate to enjoy this samurai experience, then consider a short period of boycott as just a bit of LARPing warm-up for when you actually buy the game in a few months' time. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.